like to welcome everyone to the National Association of Elementary School Principals first installment of the Aspired Principals webinar series. My name is Aaron Lurie, and I am the Director of Professional Learning here at NAESD. Today's topic is ins and outs of school administration. Today we have three phenomenal principals who are award winners, and they're going to talk about subtopics on our topic, which you would definitely enjoy. However, let's do some housekeeping before we begin. Everyone comes in as muted, so we invite you to take your questions and put them into the question box. You should see at the right-hand corner. We'll take questions after each speaker as well as at the end of the webinar. Today's first speaker is Brian Lyons. He's a 2017-18 NAESD National Outstanding Assistant Principal of the Year. He works in Wilson Elementary School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Brian, are you there?
I'm here, Aaron. Thank you.
How are you, Brian? Can you tell us a few things about yourself?
Sure, yes. I am the assistant principal at an elementary school. We have about 720 kids in our building, K to 6. I think something very interesting about myself is I never intended to be an elementary school administrator. All of my experience was in the high school. I taught psychology and law to juniors and seniors, and this was a whole new world to me, and I could not be happier that I ended up in an elementary building. So it's certainly a privilege and an honor to be with you guys today.
Well, thank you for joining us, Brian. Today's Brian's topic is shaping our leadership identity. What's your why? And he's going to elaborate on that a little bit more. Again, our main topic for today is the ins and outs of school administration for our aspiring principals, people who actually want to endeavor in being in administration. I hand everything over to you, Brian, and thank you again.
Thank you, Aaron. So as I was getting ready for today, I started thinking about my first year as an administrator and thinking about all the things that I didn't know, that I didn't realize. One of the things that I felt that I was lacking, looking back on it, was a clear vision and an understanding of who I was as a leader. I thought I had a pretty good idea. I thought I knew what was important to me, but I really did not engage in that deep reflection that I think is critically important when we are establishing ourselves as leaders. Instead, I got wrapped up in the day-to-day drinking from the fire hose, barely treading water, and just maintaining the status quo within the building. And it wasn't until I happened to cross this book, you can see on the slide there, The Leadership Challenge by James Koozies and Barry Posner, that it really got me to think about my practice and think about my leadership more than just putting out fires on a day-to-day basis. So through this purposeful introspection, I started thinking about, what is important to me? Is it innovation? Is it student autonomy? Is it curiosity? Where do I need to lead the people in my building? And Honor, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as I started to reflect on this, then it almost like the light went on and things became clear, because I started to view decisions that I was making, not only the big decisions, but the small everyday decisions through that lens of what is important to me. Ultimately, it came down to empathy, respect, teamwork, innovation, and patience were my top 5. I think it's important if someone were to come up to you and say, what is your leadership philosophy? Would you be able to respond immediately? What would you say? When I first started, I have no idea what I would have said. I know I wouldn't have been able to respond immediately, but I think it's a critical reflection that all leaders must go through. Through that process, I think ultimately what happens is you start to understand what's important to you and then what guides that decision making. coming into a new building, especially in my circumstances, as what is this high school person going to come in and tell the 20-year second grade teacher how to do her job? It was important for me to build some credibility as a leader. So first having that vision and knowing what is important to me, but then also walking the walk and talking the talk. If you're credible, you connect what you say with what you do. And I think that's incredibly important to remember. And then in conversations, you consistently have to articulate those beliefs. And when you make decisions and you can relay those beliefs that are driving those decisions, I think people start to buy in. They know where you're coming from. And then it almost becomes, they know the answer before they even come to you with a question. Through the process, I think you typically will discover two types of values. The first kind is a long-term kind of vision, where you see your role within education, where you see education going, and where you see your obligation to your students. And then the second part is the day-to-day. So those principles that are going to guide you along that journey, that path to that ultimate vision. When you have a clear understanding of those values, it really, truly, honestly makes the decision-making process that much easier. Hunter, could you go to the next slide, please? So as a leader in a school, of course, you have to remember that it's not just your values that guide the school. You do have to reach out to stakeholders to understand and appreciate their values as well. And in our building, that could be our teachers, it could be the support personnel that works within our building, it's the parents, and it's absolutely, without a doubt, the students as well. Now, it doesn't always mean that we appease everyone and that we're always able to make everyone's values come to the forefront and be honored. But I think when you make a concerted effort to understand where people are coming from and then provide your own context for where you're coming from, it does become a little bit easier to buy in. Now, the next step, and I think this is going to kind of play into what Caitlin will talk about next too, is that just as your values guide your work, so too do the values of your teachers and parents. That guides their commitment to their kids and the school that they attend. And I think the true magic in leadership is being able to affirm those shared values, identify those shared values with your teachers and your community. And then once you do have those shared values identified, you build alignment around those, alignment that everyone can share, everyone is on board. We may have some that are all in and some that have a toe in the water or waist deep, but in the end we can all move forward towards those values. As I was thinking about this, one of my most favorite all-time comedians was Mitch Hedberg, and he told this joke where he would say, you can't please all the people all the time, and last night all those people were at my show. And I feel like that's almost the perfect embodiment of what it means to be a school administrator. Not everyone is going to be on board, but I think if they see your passion and they see your energy and they understand your values that you've continued to articulate, then they can go along with it. They can agree to disagree and move forward. As we're looking at honoring other people's values and affirming their values, the branches within that I kept thinking about really go far and wide. So even down to hiring new staff and bringing people into our building and our district, we are very conscientious of trying to, through interview questions, identify what is important to them. We might ask a question like, do your students have to like you? And there's no right or wrong answer, but we just love to listen to how they respond to that and the value that they place in that relationship with their students. I think once we have that and we have those shared, affirmed commitments, then those almost become our brand and our identity. And so if you were to follow us on Twitter at WilsonLM, what you'll see is all the things that are important to us, whether it's the leadership within the building, whether it's our teachers, our parents. We celebrate that learning. We celebrate those things that are important to us. We celebrate the innovation. We celebrate the empathy, taking care of others. And it has become who we are. Ultimately, through this process, I think people feel that they're a part of something very special when they come to our building and our school. There's a sense of belonging, a sense of commitment, and a sense that each of them is working for a greater purpose, to really support these kids. I think the one big cautionary area for all of this is with the idea that this cannot be forced. Now, there is absolutely no way that you can impose your values on somebody else. We're all individuals, and we're all trying to do the best job that we can. So the only way that you truly do get them on board is through dialogue and debate. It's not, this is the way it's going to be. It's that dialogue, that conversation about why honesty and integrity is important to me and why I think it should be pervasive within our school building. And then ultimately you arrive at understanding and commitment. It is that work. It is that work in introspection and understanding who you are as a leader that ultimately is going to guide that leadership and take you through decisions that work, decisions that don't work. But if you're grounded and you understand why the decision was made and the people around you understand why the decision was made, then hopefully you can move forward with that. The last thing that I want to leave you all with was the idea of innovation. So being an innovative school is incredibly important to me, and we have built that as one of our shared values within the school. That being said, one of the things that we do each year, the day before spring break, is we host a student-led innovation tech conference. So whereas in your job, you might go to a professional conference, we do the same thing with our kids, only our kids are the keynotes, our kids lead all the sessions, and they are teaching their peers something new and exciting. But then the teachers are there as well, sitting alongside these kids, learning coding with Camden, for instance. And it pushes people, it pushes teachers to see, wow, these kids can do this, I can do this. It might even be a first grade teacher who uses the app Seesaw, and someone's walking down the hall and sees a kid recording a video to send to his parents and asks a question, and then next thing you know, they want to try it. So it truly builds that culture. It builds that identity. It builds who we are as a school and as a community of learners. In the end, regardless of all of the work that you do, regardless of the time that you put in, ultimately it's incumbent upon you to be accountable and to make sure that you are living it every single day, that you know who you are as a leader, and that the people around you know who you are as a leader as well. So that's really all I have. I really would encourage you to look into the Leadership Challenge. It is an excellent read. It encompasses a lot of leadership ideas and approaches. It's an excellent, excellent resource.
I'd like to thank you, Brian. That was excellent.
You're
I
welcome.
heard three things that stuck out with me, and I heard integrity.
Yes.
You have to be committed as well as accountability. So those are key elements when we're building our identity. But at this time, with that topic on our minds, let's have a poll question about Brian's presentation. The poll for today is, as an aspiring principal, how well do you know or understand your own values? So in the polling place boxes, you will put either you're extremely strong about this, you're strong, you're marginal, you need improvement, or you're not really sure. If you're not sure, I need you to use the question box over there, and I need you to explain why you're not sure about that. So again, the question is, as an aspiring principal, how well do you know or understand your own values? At this time, I would love for you to take the poll in question, and let's see the results.
All right, the poll is running. We'll give it a few more. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, Aaron, and share the response.
All right? 100% say that they're marginal. How do you feel about that, Brian?
It sounds like an area for growth. I cannot understate how important it is to know your why and know why you come to work every day and establish that not first amongst yourself, but then amongst your staff and students and parents as well.
Yes, Brian spoke earlier. He said he didn't really know that he was going to go into this administration thing the way that he did. But again, he learned as he went through, and looking at the results, those people who are currently marginal, as you grow and learn more about being a leader, you'll go into the categories of strong and extremely strong. But I'd like to thank you, Brian, and if anyone has any questions for Brian, I'll take this time to have you to write them in the chat box. We'll give you a minute or two for that.
I have a question. If you would write your questions in the question box, the question I have for you, Brian, is what kind of resources can you recommend for people who want to explore their own strengths? I mean, is there any kind of survey, or what kind of things did you do to kind of identify your own values?
Yeah, great question. So I think a lot of it started with the reflection components within the book, The Leadership Challenge. But then as you, just a quick Google search, there's a lot of research done in this area of workplace satisfaction. I know Procter & Gamble is a local company, and they have quite a lot of information regarding how do you do this and how do you arrive at your own values. It could even be something as simple as personality tests or learning styles. I would say the best stepping off point is that book, The Leadership Challenge, though.
Great.
I had a question as well, Brian. The issue that I had when I was first going into administration is pleasing everybody and keeping your own values. Did you have any type of problem with pleasing your staff, but trying to keep your own values in, at bay?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that was even more prominent just being the high school guy coming down to the elementary world, that, what was important to me was not necessarily important to the kindergarten teacher with the kid hiding underneath the table at that time. So I think it was a slow process. I think I tried to hold true to myself and always explain where I was coming from with that. I think what's beneficial for me is one of my strong areas that is really important to me is exercising patience in leadership. I'm the kind of person that when I see something, like I want to go and I want to go now. And so understanding to me that I have to be patient and I have to allow people to come into this process at their own speed, but providing support. At the end of the day, however, as the leader in the building, the buck stops with me. And if we're going to do something, I might explain it till I'm blue in the face, but ultimately this is what we're doing. So you can either get on board with it or not. I think a great example with that is our weekly update email to staff. At first, it comes out every Friday at the same time and has the information that you need on there for the following week. And at the beginning, there might be a teacher who comes and says, hey, I had no idea there was an assembly on Wednesday. It's like, well, it's been in the staff update the last 2 weeks. I'd encourage you to read that. And it's that slow training process of the information is there. This is the process. This is the system. This is what's important to me. And this is the direction we're going to go.
All right. Great. Honor, did we have any questions before we moved on?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you again, Brian. We appreciate your presentation. And our next presenter is also a 2017-2018 NAESB National Outstanding Assistant Principal of the Year. I'd like to welcome again Caitlin Inglemore Ford. Caitlin, are you there?
I am here, Aaron. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Caitlin?
Well, I was an assistant principal for 7 years, and I was just promoted this July to principal of the same school. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited. This is in total my 13th year at Porter Traditional School in Prince William County, Virginia, and it truly is my home. I've gotten to know the grades that we have here at Porter Traditional is grades 1 through 8. So it's phenomenal to be able to see, them grow up over the last 8 years. You get to know their families and their brothers and their sisters, so it truly is a family atmosphere.
So you've seen a whole school graduate from from the beginning to the end.
Yes, and my first year as assistant principal, for my first year as principal, they are now in 8th grade, from 1st grade to 8th grade.
Great.
Yeah.
Caitlin's topic for today, under our broad topic of the ins and outs of school administration, is creating significant trust relationships. This also kind of blends in with Brian's. You're learning about your identity. At the same time, you need to build significant trust relationships. And I'll allow Caitlin to elaborate on that a little bit more.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron. And what a wonderful segue in from Brian's presentation about how he had to define himself as a leader and his goals, and then what we do and how that helps us to be able to impact those that we lead. And so, Honor, if you could go to the next slide. Our focus, just like Brian's was, I had a great read over the summer, and that was Jimmy Casa's Culturize, which is a phenomenal, very easy, quick read, but it really helped me to define and focus in on what my goals were for my staff this year as taking over as principal for the first time. And when I was able to help define myself, as Brian was saying, it became so clear on what I needed to do to be able to promote my staff and take them to the next level. We are a very high-achieving school here in Prince William County, Virginia, and what we needed to do is to be able to take that to the next level. We're still seeing a little bit of an achievement gap, and where it kind of all came together for me is you see the quote in the middle of your screen, when you know your why, your what has more impact. And that's by a comedian, Michael Jr., and if you've ever seen his video on YouTube, if you just Google into YouTube, know your why, his YouTube video is going to come up, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, but I'm not going to spoil it. He goes on these tours, and he asked this gentleman who was a choir director to sing a song. And the choir director did a phenomenal job at it. And then after that, Michael Jr. gave a scenario of how that person was to sing the song, the background of the person as they were singing it. And you will have it already gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, but if you haven't seen that, it really helps define why it's so important to take those that we lead, whether it's our students, our parents, and our teachers, to remind them about what their why and their purpose is here so that we can be able to take them together in the next step. So one of our focuses for the teachers this year was some of those things. Why did they become a teacher? What led them to this place in their career? And we started this process even back when we started hiring those teachers for this year and asking where they're from, what their backstory was. And some of the great things that we did for even our returning teachers, we gave them a platform to be able to share with each other why they got into teaching. I have one teacher who was so motivated. She's from Trinidad and Tobago, and her father could not read, and the whole reason why she went to school is because she wanted to be a teacher so that she could be able to help her father learn how to read. In different scenarios like that, and we have career switchers, and so to understand what their background, their journey is, you have such a better sense of what motivates them, what inspires them to be able to go to the next level in their teaching and have those conversations. And sometimes those conversations need to be those courageous conversations where we're giving multiple forms of feedback. So if you haven't seen that video by Michael Jr. on YouTube, it's a phenomenal one to be able to check out and to show your staff, or even just for yourself. So if you go to the bottom of my slide, when it talks about, knowing each other's whys, and you build those relationships, so when they're coming in at the beginning of the day, whether it's their student or parents and they're having meetings with you, especially with students, we always talk about them bringing in the second backpack, that invisible one that just kind of always weighs on them. And when we get to know those students more and we get to understand where they come from, our approach to those students is different. Well, the same thing goes with our parents, and the same thing goes with our staff. When we understand where they're coming from, we can be able to inspire them, help them get to the next level. And especially in times when we need to take risks together as a staff and as a community, when we know each other and our purpose and why we're all here and that we're all on the same page. And even though it might be scary to try something new, the fact that we are all in this collectively together will be able to take us to the next level. So go ahead, Honor, and go to the next slide. So once we know a little bit about that why, what does it look like? So especially with our parents, students, and teachers, I think one of the most impactful things that we can do when we are working with them is when we meet with them, they're usually there for a purpose, whether they're talking about their home life or whether the teacher's having a frustration with a student. I think sitting down with them, you're closing all of your technology, you're turning everything off. In that moment, they are your #1 priority. And I think that when they feel, and like I said down the bottom, not only do they want to be heard, but they want to feel heard. And so when they leave this office, whether it's a student who just gone through a discipline issue, but really they had an awful morning before they got to school, they want to talk about it, and they want to tell you their side and where they're coming from. So the key would be not only to make them, feel like they're being heard, but make them feel like they're heard. And so when they leave your office and when they leave school, they know that someone has invested in them, that someone understands, appreciates, and has made it a priority to understand where they're coming from. Honor, if you could go to the next slide. So what are some of the ways that we can do this? So now we've kind of established those relationships with people, we've learning their whys, and we've now listened to them. So how have we as administrators here at Porter have kind of implemented that into our everyday, day-to-day interactions? So one of the things that I worked with this year is a lot of John Hattie's research on impact on student learning, and we did a lot of activities at the beginning of the year that we focus on, throughout the school. Technology, parent deployment, we're a high area of military deployments, what that impact has. And John Hattie has some phenomenal research out there, and it really puts into perspective for us as teachers some of those things that we kind of lose or forget about in the day-to-day just because we're bombarded with so many different things that we need to kind of check off the list. So we're turning back to that why and what this impact has. And my staff was very surprised to see that collective teacher efficacy had that 1.57 impact, which it shows that we can work on, our co-teaching strategies, and we can, do our research on homework and its impact. But in the end, us truly believing together, collectively, as a community, how our impact is on student learning is more effective than many of the strategies that we've been using. So we've really, everything has gone back to John Hattie's research this year. Another way is we had our teachers share their whys to everybody. If those of you who are familiar with Recap and have used Recap in their classrooms, it's a phenomenal website application. So if you look to the right of the slide, there is a little demo there of what a student looks like. It's a video blog response. So a student gets a code, and they go in and they put the code in, and it asks them a question, and they are able to video record themselves telling their story. It's great for reading journals or describing how to complete a math problem. But in this way, I modeled it for our staff, but I asked them, tell us why you became a teacher. Because once at that beginning of the year, and we all came together as a staff, and we're getting inspired for the year, we started showing those at all of our breaks. So by the end, all of our teachers had had a 1-minute intro of why we were all here. And once we start making those connections, we are able to better support each other as a staff and inspire and motivate them. So if you haven't heard of Let's Recap, it is a phenomenal resource, not only for administrators, but it's a great thing to use in the classroom as well, and it is free, which is an even better reason why to use it. And then the last thing we do, we are a thinking map school, and we're promoting thinking maps and teaching the thinking maps to our students. One of the reasons why we're considered a traditional school is because we maintain traditions from first grade all the way through 8th grade, including the writing process is where we integrate our thinking maps. So I was teaching our staff and our students about the thinking maps, those who are new in first grade, and the way that we introduce ourselves is we create a My Story introduction through the thinking map process. So each week they learn about a new thinking map, but they make a relationship between themselves and the map. So for example, the first week they did a circle map and they defined themselves, you know, some of their characteristics. And so right now they're posted all over the school. So there's pictures of families, pictures of countries that they're from, and teachers did it too, which was the great thing, because then the students can make those connections with their teachers. And we're all the way now onto the double bubble, and so myself and my assistant principal, we compare and contrasted each other and on some of our similarities and some of our differences. So that's something that was a great introduction, not only to our students, but our staff as well, on how we can build those relationships and understanding where our students are coming from by allowing that. We also, my Twitter handle is at the bottom of the slide there, at K_Engelmeyer. We have a lot of videos and we have a lot of tweets that we put out and showing a lot of this process. So I would be more than happy to help anybody follow through that process as well. Erin, do we have any questions?
I think we're going to go ahead and, Erin, there, I think we're going to go to a poll, I think, first. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if Erin's having technical difficulties. Give him a second to do that. In the meantime, the poll question is, as an aspiring principal, how are you with forming trusting relationships with others? And the possible answers are, comes easy, somewhat confident, have difficulties, and need more improvement. Not sure. So Erin, you want to follow us through on this?
Yes. The polling question, again, is, as an aspiring principal, how are you with forming trusting relationships with others? Does it come easy to you? Are you somewhat confident about it? Are you having difficulties? Do you need improvement? Or you're not sure? If you're not sure, I need you to let me know why you're not sure in the box. Now, I took a lot of takeaways from Caitlin's presentation. Key things that I noted was you have to know about your why. You got to know how to be a great listener, and you have to make those connections. When you're doing those things, it helps you to establish rapport. So let's see the results from our polling today and see what they are. We have 50% says it comes easy, and we have 50% says it's somewhat confidence with it. They're confident with it. So that's a good showing. What you think, Caitlin?
I think that's great.
Yes, I also think that's great as well. I was looking over here. I think, Anna, do we have a question for Caitlin over there in the box?
Yes, so now's the time for you to ask your questions in the question box. Just type those in and we'll get them answered. But in the meantime, I have a question on that. You mentioned that when you do all of this, is this a one-time thing that you do at the beginning of each year, or what's your process for going through this? Is this like a one-time activity or a series of activities? If you could just kind of talk a little more about that.
Sure. So our overlying theme for the year was to know your why. And we introduced that at the beginning of the year with the video from Michael Jr. about your why. And that kind of set the stage for the year. And so since then, we've shown a lot of the whys from all the teachers, but every once in a while when we meet together as a staff, we'll show a few more. And then the thinking maps that are being rolled out of the My Story, that's done on a weekly basis. So we're continuing to learn more about each of our students. And when we're talking about our relationships with parents, you know, one of the things that I love and has been so noticed by a lot of my parents is I am in the front of the car line every day with a large smile on my face, welcoming those kids in, and, you know, rain or, you know, shine. And so when they see that and they see how happy we are, they know that they're dropping their students off at a wonderful place, and where, you know, they know when we call those parents, they know that we know their child. And that's important that they feel that as well. But it is a continuous process of building those relationships, because as you know, it doesn't come overnight. We can bring those whys to the surface, but still connecting throughout the year is our #1 priority with all students, staff, and parents.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin, again, for sharing your presentation and sharing that knowledge with us about building those trusting relationships. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Our final presenter is also a 2018 NAESP National Outstanding Assistant Principal of the Year. Her name is Melissa Freestat. Melissa, are you there?
I am. Hello, everyone.
How are you, Melissa?
I'm great, Aaron.
A few things about yourself, Melissa.
Sure. In the area in which I work, we are a rural community. We have 3 schools, an elementary, a middle, and a high school, and I have had the privilege of working at all 3 schools in my 18 years of career in education.
Wow. That's an experience for you. All 3 schools?
All 3 schools, so I get to see the elementary perspective, a middle school perspective, and a high school perspective, which shapes me into the educator in which I am today. So I'm very thankful for the opportunities that I have had in my 18 years.
Wow. And Melissa's topic today is restructuring schools. Hey, she has to be an expert at this. She's seen the schools on different levels. At the same time, this is something that a future leader needs to know about. And Melissa will elaborate on this a little bit more.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm not sure if we'll go with an expert because as Caitlin and Brian were talking, I'm writing down notes of what they're saying, and I know that I'm going to email Brian about some things that he talked about. So I am constantly learning, and I hope what I can share, somebody will find one thing to take away from them. Honor, if you could go to the next slide, please. I just want to give you a little background about Pocomoke Elementary School, and which will help you understand my story and our goals at Pocomoke Elementary School. If you look at the top, I have a quote on each slide. I like quotes. I think it's important. It says education is the key to opportunity. It's a ticket out of poverty. And in our area, a lot of our students do come from poverty. Pocomoke Elementary is pre-K through 3rd grade. We have about 400 students. Of those 400 students, 65% are free or reduced. It's a Title I school. Not only is there poverty, but it's a hot spot for illegal substances. And it's important that we make sure these kids come to school every day and get the education that they deserve and need so they can get out of that cycle and go on and make something of themselves, because I am committed to that and making sure that it's a safe, nurturing environment where they can thrive socially, emotionally, and academically. And I wholeheartedly believe, just like every other educator out there, that every child can and will learn. And not only is our school a Title I school, but it's also a high achieving Title I school. I'm just going to take a few minutes to brag. The teachers there work hard, and the students work hard, and the faculty work hard. Pocomoke Elementary School is a National Title I Distinguished School for 2017 and 2012. It's the only school in Maryland to receive it twice within 5 years. So I'm really proud, and it's because of the work that the teachers, staff, and students do there. So if we could go on to the next slide so we can begin to talk about a best practice that is happening at Pocomoke Elementary. And it's focused on personalized learning, and if you look at the top of the slide, it says everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So we need to find what works for children. We need to embrace personalized learning for all students. It's just not an administrator's job to do that, but it's a collaborative effort. When I mean collaborative, I mean teachers, staff, and parents. It's ongoing, and we need to make sure that all stakeholders are involved. And we are constantly analyzing the data so we can determine what is the best way to meet the needs of the children, because we know not everybody learns at the same pace. So it is important that we are meeting them where they are so we can give them the interventions and supports that they need to be successful. And at Pocomoke Elementary School, they use a 3-tiered system, which is called response to intervention. And if you go to my next slide, we kind of look at, the 3 tiers. And I'm assuming everyone is familiar with response to intervention, but if not, real quickly, it's based on 3 tiers. You have Tier 1, which is core instruction, Tier 2, targeted interventions, and then Tier 3, which is really only for your 5 to 10% of your student population. That's your really, really intense interventions that you're going to work with students in groups of 2 or individuals, so you can really hit home and make sure that they are grasping those concepts that you need. And I really like this quote at the top. My teacher thought I was smarter than I was, so I was, and that was a 6-year-old, and I think that's really important. We need to believe that our children can learn and that they will learn, because if we believe that, then they're going to believe that. So at Pocomoke Elementary School, every student there gets the Tier 1 core instruction, and we are a Common Core state, so we do follow the Maryland College and Career Readiness Standards. And in doing so, when everybody gets that curriculum, that's a prevention and early intervention for all. But then we do have some of those struggling students that need a little bit more than the basic core instruction, and that's Tier 2. And those are some targeted instruction interventions, and that's given at least 30 minutes a day, and it's a little more, you're using your data to make those decisions on what those students need. You're going to look at your formative assessments. You're going to look at some of your summative assessments from previous years so you can scaffold the instruction and provide those students with targeted interventions meeting their needs of where they are, and this needs to be done at least 30 minutes daily. And hopefully with that, you're able to catch those students up if it's in reading, at grade level, and if you're not successful with the Tier 2 instruction, and then we need to go to Tier 3 instruction, and that's really where we start to dive in and look at those students, look at each one individually, see where they are performing, whether it's math or reading, and see what specifically those students need. It's very intensive, and it needs to be done at least 60 minutes a day. You can use research-based or evidence-based or a combination of both. And you're really looking at, when you're focusing on your Tier 3 instructions, you're looking at those foundational skills. Something is missing, something is lacking. So that's where you're going to build those foundations, and you're going to really hone in on the personalization for those students. It's called response to intervention. We at Pocomoke Elementary School, they have been doing RTI for a long time. It is even now county-wide. They have followed our process in which we do because we have had success. We've had our students are performing. Given that it's a Title I school, they do perform high. And I know sometimes when we think about RTI and these interventions, cost sometimes can be an issue, but what's important to keep in mind is programs don't teach kids, people do. So we can spend the best money for a program, but that doesn't necessarily, is that the biggest bang for our buck? So we need to keep in mind programs don't teach kids. People teach kids. So there are a lot of free resources out there, web-based. I have a few. Khan Academy, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Khan Academy. It's a really great resource. MobyMax. And a lot of these things you can sign up for a free trial period, or some of the programs are even free. Extramath.com, Math Reasoning Inventory, Math, Helps program for reading and Read Naturally. You need to go out there and look and see what's going to work for you, because this can be applied in your classroom. If you don't have your own classroom and you might be an instructional coach, maybe you want to try it with a group of students, look at the data, look at their assessments, look where they are, and go out and try to find some interventions. I know the National Center on Intensive Interventions reviews a lot of the interventions that are out there. It's a great resource. You can scroll through. They rate them. They tell you about the studies that they have been done, because that's half the battle, knowing what is out there and knowing what works. And you have to figure out what's going to work for your students, because what worked one year might not necessarily work for the next year. And it's important to get to know your students. And if you could go to the next slide, please. And as you are an aspiring leader, not only do you want to think about getting to know your students, but there's some other things that you need to think about. And I have this quote up here from Abraham Lincoln. It says, "Don't worry when you are not recognized, but strive to be worthy of recognition." I thought that was really neat, because we were fortunate enough as an entire county this summer to listen to Kim Bearden. She is one of the co-founders of the Ron Clark Academy. One of the takeaways from her that really resonated with me was seek significance, not accomplishments, because eventually the accomplishments will come, but really what you want to do is you want to seek significance. And you can do that by making sure that you are meeting the needs of all of your students in your building, or if you're a classroom teacher, aspiring to be a leader in your classroom. And it's important that, and I think this is what Brian touched upon too, creating a shared vision around academic success. It's not just my vision, it needs to be everyone's vision. We have to have a buy-in. If we're going to be successful, both academically, emotionally, socially, we need to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And we also need to empower teacher leaders. I can't do this by myself. No one can run a school by themselves. So it's important that we look at those future leaders and that we empower them and give them choices and decisions so they can help our building run successfully. And I know that Caitlin talked about this too, is about building quality relationships with staff, students, and community. It's important that we have the support of the community, especially in an area like Pocomoke, where a lot of the parents now have kids coming to this school and they might not have had the best experience, but it's important that we make them feel welcome and they want to come into school, because everybody's in this together, and everyone wants their child to be successful, and the parents need to feel that we love and that we support not only their child, but we support them too, and that we value their opinion. And I think this is really important too. We need to celebrate the success of others. I think it makes other people feel good when you recognize what they are doing right. And I think, it kind of keeps the magic alive when you highlight a teacher or you highlight a staff member for doing something great. It might inspire another staff member or teacher to do something similar or to think outside the box. So that's important, to celebrate the success of others. Build trust amongst your staff. That goes along with building relationships. And seek out colleagues for advice. I think that's really important. There are some great leaders in the county where I work, in Worcester County, and there are some great leaders, you know, across the United States with all of these professional organizations. Seek out advice from people who have done it before. You are not in this alone. And this kind of goes with the next one. Learn from your mistakes. No one is perfect. We are all going to make mistakes. And what's important, like I tell my students, we need to learn from our mistakes. If we are truly sorry or regretful, we need to learn from it. So in education, we as leaders need to learn from our mistakes. And it's okay to say, you know what, I made a mistake. I don't think it was right in doing that way. I think it's important that we recognize and that the staff recognizes that when I make a mistake, that I need to let them know. And last, it's okay to say, I don't know, because sometimes, you know, people are going to come at you all the time. They're going to ask you questions. What are your thoughts about this? And it's okay to say, I don't know, you know, let's look at this together, because we don't have all the answers. And I think being honest is really important, and it's going to go a long way with your faculty and staff. So I hope that you are able to take a piece of my presentation away and try it either in your classroom or with a group of students that you work with, and maybe see some improvement in the academic success. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I'm going to tie in all three, and I have a question for you. Again, Brian dealt with your identity, and again, Caitlin dealt with building trust and relationships, and you also deal with restructuring the schools. So my question is, I'm putting myself in the position of the listeners who are aspiring leaders. I get a job as a school administrator. This is my first year, and I have to build my personal leadership style under Brian, knowing my identity, as well as building trust and relationships amongst my staff. How do I incorporate the 3 tiers with my teachers when I'm a first-year administrator? I saw you had the 3 tiers.
Sure, yes.
I know they each have a different time period. I know they have to do extensive lesson planning. So how do I present this to them being new? You know how tough it is being new.
Sure, and I know that this might be a big shift change for some of the teachers in the building that have been doing things, you know, for years and years and years, and here comes this new administrator thinking, you know, that they're going to change their way of doing things. But I think the important thing is to remember it's all about the approach. And when teachers know that you are doing this because it's in the best interest of the students and the best interest of the children, because we want them to be successful. Ultimately, we're there to serve them. And I think if that's communicated to them, and you need to put supports in place for the teachers, because anytime there's change, there's always going to be questions. Well, how do I do this? You know, what do I need to do? And what are my resources? And I think, you know, you let them know, we're a team. We are all in this together. This is what I expect at first. I don't want to walk into your room and see this taking place all at once, because I know that that's not a realistic goal. You know, let's start out small. Let's break it down. This is what we're going to start with, so everybody's all on the same page. And then once we have mastered that, okay, let's add this next step in. All right, so we've mastered this. Now let's add the last and final step, and you kind of set landmarks. Like by November, maybe that's where you want to start to analyze your data, because that's the really big piece, is analyzing the data and knowing, okay, well, I have all this data, now what? What am I going to do with it? So I think, you know, being there as a support and a resource for them and guiding them along the way and not kind of just throwing them out to the wolves, I think is really important.
Well, thank you. That leads right into my polling question for the day. And the polling question for the day is, as an aspiring principal, how do you feel about working with evidence-based programs, using resources and interventions? Again, as you heard Melissa say, you have all this data that you have to look at to make your plans. Do you feel it comes easy? You're somewhat confident about using this evidence-based information. You have difficulties with it. Do you need some improvement, or are you really not sure? If you're not sure, I need you to put in the box a reason that you're not sure. So again, the question is, as aspiring principals, how do you feel about working with evidence-based programs, using research and interventions? Go ahead and fill in the answers in the box for me, please. And looking at the answers, the results, 75% of the people say that it comes easily, and we have 25% said they have difficulties. Did you want to elaborate on any of that, Melissa? For the people having difficulties, what you think they should do?
Sure, I think that's understandable because there is so much out there, and you know, it's kind of shifting through what works, what's good, you know, like I said, the most bang for your buck, because you can spend a lot of time out there looking at these resources, and you know, you might try it and it's not worth it. So I think that's where, you know, you want to talk amongst your colleagues, see if they've used something, or, you know, even go to some of your supervisors or your coordinators. They're, quote unquote, the experts, and ask them, go out, seek help, seek advice, because it can be difficult and it can be very overwhelming, especially for new teachers and new administrators.
Well, I want to thank all three of our outstanding school administrators, Brian Lyons, Caitlin Engelmeyer, as well as Melissa Freestat, for being with us today and sharing this information. Again, if you would show their information just in case people would like to hear more from them. If you can go to their information afterward. I think Brian's is first. If you can go to Brian's information. Yes, Brian's email is there. Brian Lyons at Forest Hills. Caitlin is there, as well as Melissa's is there. All right? To end our session, I would like to talk about our Super Bowl of events. We want you to save the date. Again, we have our 2019 NAESP Pre-K to 8 Principals Conference. It's going to be on July the 10th through the 12th in Spokane, Washington. So make sure you put that on your calendar. We just had an excellent conference in Orlando. I just heard Melissa talk about Khan Academy. We had Sal Khan as a keynote speaker just recently at our conference. So again, put this on your calendar date. We'd like to thank our Associate Executive Director, Gail Morgan, our Executive Director, Dr. Earl Franks, as well as my partner in crime, Honor Feedy. And we thank you for being on our first installment of our Aspiring Principals webinar. Thanks to you again, and I hope to see you soon.